Hi, I'm Cynthia Nichols, the Regional Public Engagement Specialist for the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv. Thanks for joining us today on Views from Ukraine, where we're going to watch an exclusive on-the-record interview with the Undersecretary of State for Economic Growth, Energy and the Environment, Jose W. Fernandez. Undersecretary Fernandez will discuss sanctions, efforts to stabilize the energy markets, and the reconstruction of Ukraine in a roundtable format with pre-selected journalists, some of whom regularly attend Views from Ukraine. All the questions discussed come directly from the journalists in attendance. The regular format of Views from Ukraine will resume next week with a discussion on the negative impact that Russia's unjustified aggression has had on Ukraine and the world. Unlike our normal format, there will be no breakout rooms today. As a reminder, the panel was recorded, on the record, and this special session will be streamed on Embassy Kyiv's social media 24 hours after the panel concludes. If you're in the main Zoom session, please remember to mute your microphones and turn off your cameras. If the internet in Ukraine drops while we're in the session, we'll dial back on to continue the stream as soon as possible. Thank you for being here. Let's get started with the roundtable with Undersecretary Fernandez.
Good morning again, and it's a pleasure to be here and to have a conversation with you on some of the issues that are taking a lot of our attention these days. I've been in Paris for a couple of days now, and to recap my visit, I have met with government, business, civil society, and other stakeholders to discuss cooperation on some of the most pressing global challenges that we're dealing with, challenges such as the supply chain resilience, the clean energy transition, climate change, and protecting and promoting critical and emerging technologies. Yesterday, I led the U.S. delegation to the Responsible Business Conduct Ministerial at the OECD, at the Organization for Economic Development and Cooperation. And there, I was pleased to co-chair with my French counterpart, Minister Olivier Brecht, the OECD's ministerial meeting on responsible business conduct. The U.S. and our like-minded partners at the OECD see responsible business conduct as the cornerstone of an inclusive, sustainable, and resilient global economy. And as we've said many, many times, American businesses can thrive if they're given a level playing field, and we will lead a race to the top. Further, by acting in a manner that is both commercially viable and responsible, we believe that businesses have the capacity to help shape society and the environment by raising local wages, improving working conditions, building trust with communities, and operating sustainably. In addition, yesterday I had a wonderful meeting, and I was very pleased to be able to meet with them, with the International Energy Agency, the IEA, on the topic that we have spent a lot of time on that fits in with the responsible business conduct that I just mentioned. And that is critical minerals. We believe that critical minerals are key to the clean energy transition, and our goal is to strengthen and diversify critical mineral supply chains by identifying and supporting strategic mining, processing, and recycling projects that adhere to the highest environmental, social, and governance standards. One of my key priorities for this trip, and the third topic that I discussed yesterday, was to advance cooperation on the positive economic agenda for the region and to promote inclusive economic recovery. And to that effect, we had a number of discussions that focused on supporting Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction. Lest we forget, and it's hard to forget, as we approach the one-year anniversary of Russia's further invasion on February 24th, I'm taking this opportunity to, first of all, demonstrate the effectiveness of sanctions on Russia, as well as to offer a progress report on what we have been trying to do in the U.S. to stabilize energy markets. Last year, at about this we're about a couple of weeks short of the one-year anniversary, but almost 1 year this month, we witnessed Vladimir Putin launch one of the gravest threats to these values and our shared security in recent history. His illegal invasion has brought untold suffering on the people of Ukraine, with ripple effects that have been felt around the world in the form of food insecurity, refugee crises, and insecurity on the global energy market. We are continuing to support and will continue to support the Ukrainian people, and also we are prepared to assist in reconstruction when Russia fails, as it must, when Russia fails in its unjust and illegal war. Our assistance to Ukraine is unwavering and will continue. Just as the U.S. has stood by Ukraine throughout this conflict, we will stand with Ukraine as it works to rebuild. The U.S., in close coordination with Ukraine and our partners, can play a leading role in rallying partners to commit the long-term project of Ukraine's reconstruction. Right now, we're focused on providing urgent support for government continuity and humanitarian assistance. We've provided $13 billion in budget support to Ukraine through World Bank mechanisms, and an additional $9.9 billion will be provided through September. So let me be clear. This is something that we will continue to do. We will continue to work with partners and allies and international financial institutions to support Ukraine's immediate economic needs and long-term recovery efforts. Something else that I have discussed on this trip is sanctions. And sanctions against Russia are working. The U.S. is supporting Europe's energy needs in the face of Russia's weaponization of energy. And on this topic, we have three objectives in our program. Number one, depriving Russia of resources and technology that it can use to continue its war and to continue to project imperial power, reducing our and our partners' reliance on Russia, and third, maintaining global stability and global markets and key commodities. Our sanctions are constricting Russia's resources. They are denying Russia and prominent Russia of the benefits of the rules-based 21st century global economy, and they're promoting atrocities promoting accountability for the atrocities and abuse inherent in Russia's imperial project. Our success is increasing our freedom of action while also furthering strategic failure for Russia. On energy, just to give you a couple of data points to show that Russia's energy weaponization is failing. The EU used to rely on Russia for approximately half of its gas imports and about a third of its oil imports. And as of late last month, the EU now receives less than 15% of its gas from Russia, and imports of Russian crude oil have fallen in Europe by at least 66%, two-thirds, and continue to decrease. These have been cuts that have been hard, and people have paid the consequences. But Europe is speaking with one voice as it rejects Russian oil and gas. On our end, the U.S. has doubled, more than doubled, in fact, its exports of LNG to the EU and the U.K. from basically 31 billion cubic meters to over 75 billion cubic meters. We've also, this basically makes up about 40% of Russia's, of European imports. So let me just end with something that I think we all realize now. Vladimir Putin thought that he could break Ukraine. He thought he could tear apart our commitment to European security and destroy our alliance. He said that Ukraine was not a country. He knows better. He thought he could wear us down. He was wrong. We now stand more united than ever with our partners here in Europe. And as we work together to provide Ukraine with the assistance that it needs, and as we work together to help the Ukrainian people, including its refugees, we will prove our commitment to what is right, to our values, and in so doing, we will secure our own future alongside that of our Ukrainian friends. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Great, thank you. Our first question is from Gilles Sange from L'Opinion, and I think, Jared, you're going to read it?
Yes, Jill submitted the question via chat, You went to Moldova before Paris. How do you see the situation there? Are you worried?
Look, we have seen Russian destabilization efforts in Moldova, and there have been reports of that. My purpose to going to Moldova was to express our support for Moldova's sovereignty and its territorial integrity. And so I had meetings with a number of government officials. I also met with civil society. I met with students, with young people, and to talk to them about their future in Moldova. I think we have the beginnings of a society that is determined to has realized that its future lies with the West, and we will continue to support Moldova as it pursues its sovereign interests.
Great. Well, next go to Alice Hancock of the Financial Times. Alice?
Alice, you may unmute yourself, please.
Hi, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much for the briefing. I had two questions. One is vis-a-vis the US IRA. There's a lot of focus obviously in the EU on the Inflation Reduction Act, but I wondered if you could please tell us your view on what is being done to counter China's push for dominance in the clean tech area, and if you think enough is being done on a European level in the US view to reduce dependence on China. And the other was...
Alice, hold on. Alice, hold on. I didn't hear you well. To counter what?
Obviously, I was saying there's a lot of focus in the EU on the US Inflation Reduction Act, but I wonder what the US view of what Europe is doing to counter the dominance from China in certain clean tech industries.
In 17 tech industries?
Yeah.
Clean tech industries.
Clean tech.
So green and sorry. Yeah.
It's okay.
Thank you. And the second was just if you could give us any indication of what is being done about the traceability requirements of diamonds on the G7 level, and progress on that, if at all possible.
Let me take the second question first, Alice. I would have to get back to you on what's being done in the G7, but as you know, the one big push that a number of countries are making in the Kimberley process involving diamonds is to expand the definition of conflict diamonds, and that's something that is something that we are discussing with many allies and partners. With respect to the G7, the presidency is Japan's, and I would suggest that you contact them for their plans. We're just getting started now on planning for the G7 year that Japan is leading. In terms of countering, if I heard you correctly, countering China in its dominance of
Clean tech.
Clean tech. Well, I mean, you've seen a couple of major developments in the U.S. So one is the CHIPS Act, which is a major investment by the Biden administration to expand and encourage chip manufacturing, diversity of supply chains of chip manufacturing. It was one of the earliest executive orders that was signed by President Biden when he took office, and we've seen already a number of semiconductor companies from outside of the U.S. announce major investments in the U.S., as well as a number of U.S. companies as well. You've seen on the U.S. side, Intel, Micron, and then on the non-U.S. side, companies such as Samsung have announced major investments there. We've also, through the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, that has an investment of $369 billion on the part of the administration on clean energy technologies, and that's part of what will be done there, and that's also something I discussed with a number of counterparts on this trip. So both the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act I think are two of the leading examples of what we're trying to do on clean tech and really technology in general.
Great. We're going to Finland for the next question. Hanna Visida, and I won't attempt to pronounce Lice Radio, I think. Sorry.
Hannah submitted her question by text, and she asked 3 parts. Can Ukraine count on U.S. help? Could Europe have done more for Ukraine? And how long will the reconstruction of Ukraine take?
Let me be crystal clear and categorical. Ukraine can count on U.S. help. President Biden has been clear that we will stand with Ukraine. There is, and this is not just the U.S. I think something that Putin did not expect is he didn't expect the solidarity that he's seen from our allies and partners. It's one of the many mistakes that he made, including, by the way, on the Finnish side, thinking that the Finland's traditional position would remain in the face of Russian aggression. We have recently the supplemental appropriations bill that was signed in December provided $45 billion in additional support to Ukraine, not only on the military side but also on the humanitarian side, and started started the process of rebuilding its electricity infrastructure that's been devastated by Putin's illegal actions and illegal invasion. That's $45 billion in December. That's on top of more than $50 billion in support that the administration has provided to Ukraine since the beginning of the Biden administration. So I think you're seeing strong support from the U.S. That support will continue until Ukraine regains its territory. We've been clear about that, and so have our allies. Could Europe have done more? Look, I think just to repeat what I said a minute ago, we've seen unprecedented coordination from our European partners. Not just on support, but if you look at what's been done on sanctions, on export controls, this has been a tight-knit alliance. Again, it's been effective, and it's not something that Putin expected. And I am missing your third question.
Last one, I think, are the challenges for Ukraine reconstruction. Right?
So,
how long?
Well, as long as it takes. The World Bank last June announced that, or estimated that the cost of rebuilding Ukraine will be upwards of $350 billion. That number obviously has increased with Russia's continued aggression. That will require not just European partners, but a number of other partners to coordinate their efforts, to support each other, and also to bring in our private sector. There will be immense opportunities for our private sector in Ukraine to do the reconstruction that's needed in a way that's sustainable, that's transparent, and that incorporates the Ukrainians. The reconstruction has to be owned by Ukraine. It's something that has to emanate from Ukraine, but you can be sure that the allies will continue their support and will participate in that reconstruction.
Great. Our next question is to Reuters, based in Belgium. Kate Abnet. Kate?
Kate has taken her hand down.
Oh. All right, moving along then. Daniel Szabo from Portfolio in Hungary. Daniel, go ahead.
He submitted his question due to technical error. Please clarify, does the United States support the Kiev government initiative to impose sanctions on Russian nuclear companies? And are you planning to impose punitive measures on Rosatom?
We do not preview our sanctions, so you will have to just stand by on that one.
Okay.
Kate now has her hand up.
Oh, great. Okay. Then we'll go. Thank you. And we'll go back to Kate. Please go ahead, Kate.
You may unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thanks.
Super, thank you. Sorry about that. I have two questions, if I may. The first is about the EU's plan to start joint gas buying among EU countries. The EU has said it wants to conclude the first joint gas buying contracts well before this summer. Please, could you give us an update from the US side, if you've had any talks with the EU about this, or on what level of interest you see among US companies to participate in these contracts? And then
Joint gas.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Kate.
And then the second question is about Europe's imports of Russian liquefied natural gas, because as pipeline gas imports from Russia have plummeted in Europe, EU countries are actually increasing their imports of LNG from Russia. Last year, they imported more Russian LNG than before the war in the previous year. Is this a cause for concern, in your view? And have you had any discussions with your European counterparts about this increase in Russian LNG imports? Thank you.
Look, on the energy side, I will tell you that that the EU now imports substantially less gas from Russia than it did before the war. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, the EU used to rely on Russia for 50% of its gas imports. It now gets less than 15% of its gas from Russia. So I'm not familiar with the numbers that you're positing, but I'll be happy to look at it and get back to you if you have a further question on that.
Next one was about joint gas line contracts.
Yeah, look, we are supporting. We will support the EU as it tries to achieve energy independence and counter the weaponization of energy from by Russia, and that includes alternative gas supplies, but also as it tries to promote renewable energy, wind and solar, in which the EU has been a leader for over a decade now, and which ultimately is the solution to Putin's blackmail of energy.
Great. Our next question is going to Sean Wellen of RTE News in Ireland. And Jared, you'll read the question.
Although the U.S. supply to Europe over the past year has been amazing, there are concerns in U.S. industry about Europe not committing to long-term contracts, which could impact on investment in future supply. What is your sense of Europe's switch to LNG? Is it long-term or just an emergency fix for the duration of the war?
I don't have a crystal ball, but I will tell you that a number of countries are considering LNG facilities and import facilities. So I think those will continue, those will expand. But again, I think ultimately Europe and the US will look at renewable energy as a solution to try and wean ourselves off any dependence on Russian oil. But I do think, I don't have a crystal ball, as I said, but LNG import facilities in Europe are being built as we speak right now.
Great. Next question is to Marc-Antoine Mazaga. And Jared, you're going to read that as well?
Yes. Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity. Could you elaborate on the common minerals standard market space discussed with Lemaire and Habeck in Washington, and what the implications are for Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia?
Repeat the question.
Could you elaborate on the common minerals standard market space that was discussed with Lemaire, Habeck in Washington, and the implications for Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia?
Okay. I have been out of the country for the last 10 days, so I am not familiar with those discussions. I will tell you, though, generally, that we've been spending a lot of time and effort with our allies and partners on critical minerals and their implications in Latin America and in Africa. You know, right now, the IEA will tell us that the world will need 42 times, 42 times the amount of lithium that it uses today if we are going to reach our net zero goals. And that's, in general, rare earths will need to increase 4 to 6 times. So the world, if we are going to get to a clean energy future, the world will need critical minerals. That's an opportunity for a number of countries in Latin America and in Africa. In fact, I was in South Africa last week, and the purpose for my visit was to spend 2 days at the biggest mining conference in Africa in Cape Town, where we discussed critical minerals with a number of African countries. And those countries told us a couple of things. Number one, they are looking for alternatives to investments. They want investments from a number of countries. And secondly, in addition to wanting alternatives, they are looking for the types of investments that will upgrade ESG standards and will adhere to the highest environmental, social, and governance standards. That has often not been the case in Africa. In fact, Pope Francis, 2 weeks ago, spoke of what he called economic colonialism on the part of nations seeking African critical minerals. We have, with 12 allies and partners, we have created the Mineral Security Partnership, the MSP, made up of 12 countries, plus the EU, and that is our attempt to do a number of things. Number one, invest and share, invest and finance jointly critical minerals projects around the world. Secondly, share information about these investments. Third, promote recycling. You know, right now we can reduce the amount of critical minerals that we need if we start looking for recycling alternatives. And lastly, to do all of these things following the highest ESG standards that we have published so that the world can judge us. The MSP is now looking at projects, and our hope is to have a few of these projects in place by the end of the year. So with that, I think that will present an opportunity for Africa and Latin America to take advantage of the world's needs for critical minerals, and also to become involved not only on the mining side, but also on the value-added industries such as processing and smelting.
Our next question, we go to Italy. Gabriella Carrara from Forniche. Gabrielle?
Yeah, good morning, and thank you for this opportunity. A few weeks ago, top Ukrainian officials were ousted in an anti-corruption sweep. So let's consider the extent of Western support and the future cost of reconstruction. Do you think that the US and the EU need to support and continue to press Zelensky in his anti-corruption efforts? Thank you.
Look, we know, and we all of our funding, not just the US, but all of us are answerable to our taxpayers. So we all have an interest in transparency. We were encouraged, and we very much supported the quick actions that President Zelensky took in response to allegations of corruption in Ukraine a couple of weeks ago. You know, I will tell you as a lawyer, the fact that you're able to denounce and take action on corruption is a sign that is being taken seriously. And so we know that there's a need to obviously have oversight, strong oversight of the funds being spent in the Ukraine, but we believe and stand with President Zelensky with the actions that he took, which demonstrate that the Ukrainian government is committed to transparency.
Great. Our next question is Jacob Hank from Belgium. Politico. Jakob? Are you muted?
Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, I was waiting to be allowed to unmute myself. Thanks. You might have mentioned this already in your initial statement, but I'm very interested in this idea of a raw materials club and the IRA negotiations between the EU and the US. Are there negotiations going on right now ahead of the March announcement? And then a second question, this one's less serious, but it was serious to some of your French colleagues. The French defense minister, since you mentioned colonialism, economic colonialism, the French defense minister was not amused at the latest Disney Black Panther movie, saying that, it depicted French soldiers basically stealing African raw materials. Do you have a comment on that one?
Okay. I stopped watching movies when my kids were 12, kids movies. So I'm gonna have to pass on that. What was the first question?
First question was Raw Minerals Club?
Oh, the Minerals
Club, sorry.
Yeah, I think when you refer to the Raw Minerals Club, you mean the countries that under the Inflation Reduction Act would be considered to have an FTA. Is that what you mean by that?
Jakob?
Yep, I was trying to unmute again. Thanks. Well, we've been hearing about a critical raw materials club.
What is that?
Well, I was hoping that you would have more.
I mean, the only thing I can imagine is the Inflation Reduction Act provides that critical minerals from certain countries with which we have an FTA would be eligible for the subsidies provided in the IRA. It's not a club. It's what the legislation provides. And I know. Look, we have created a US-EU task force on the Inflation Reduction Act. We have taken the concerns expressed by our counterparts here in Europe very, very seriously. From day one, we've been open to their comments, and we continue to discuss them. And a couple of things to keep in mind. Number one, let's take a step back and understand that the Inflation Reduction Act is the largest investment ever made on our renewable energy futures, $369 billion. And it's the US walking the talk on our climate change goals. And our goals and the opportunities, business opportunities and commercial opportunities raised by the IRA that's not a zero-sum game. So it's not because the U.S. benefits does not mean that a European company does not, and vice versa. We are now in discussions with the EU, have been since the task force was created. When President Macron was in Washington, President Biden made it very clear the IRA is not intended to exclude our partners or exclude anyone really, or we're not going to achieve our climate change goals on the back of the Europeans. And so you've had an interpretation in the regulations of the IRA on something like, for example, commercial vehicles. Commercial vehicles were carved out of some of the restrictions in the Inflation Reduction Act. And depending on the year, Jakob, the imports of commercial vehicles in the U.S. make up about 20 to 40% of all sales of automobiles in the U.S. So that immediately reduces that issue, although it remains an important issue. It remains an issue that we take very seriously, and we expect Treasury to come out with with further regulations that will clarify what the IRA will say, and also the discussions with Europe and with a number of other partners around the world continue on how we can make sure that the IRA benefits all of our climate goals going forward.
Great. I understand Daniel Szabo from Hungary has a follow-up question. Jared, go ahead.
What is your assessment of the trade dispute between the U.S. and the European Union over the Inflation Reduction Act? Are there talks underway to coordinate European Union and U.S. support programs in the area of green energy transition? And do you fear a trade war between the EU and U.S.?
Look, we stand, both the EU and ourselves are clear on our objectives, and that is to reach a clean energy future, a future that we can leave our children and grandchildren, and that we know quite well the existential threat that our planet faces as a result of climate change. So we are, that's why we've said from day one we take the concern seriously from the EU. That's why we've created the EUUS task force, which is a task force that to this day is continuing to look for ways where we can all participate in the clean energy future.
Great. Do we have one more, I think? Okay, great. We're getting down to the final questions. And next one goes to Alexandra de Hoop-Scheffer. Alexandra, over to you. Oh, Jerry's going to read. I apologize.
The EU27 are still seeking exemptions from the IRA, similar to those for Canada and Mexico, while many in Brussels are skeptical that this will be achieved. What kind of exemptions would the US be willing to offer to European industries, and for which industries?
Look, the IRA is legislation. And those discussions, as I've mentioned now a couple of times, are being held as we speak between the EU and the US. However, we've got to realize that the legislation cannot be changed. We may be able to reach some agreements based on regulations, but the legislation will remain. But those discussions are ongoing. We have taken, from day one, we've taken the concerns seriously. We've spent a lot of time. There's probably not a week in which I don't spend 2 hours or more dealing with IRA issues and talking to my colleagues here in Europe and in Japan and elsewhere, in Korea as well. So we're looking for ways. We're looking for ways where we can all work together on the existential threat of our time, which is climate change.
I think perhaps our last question we have is from Matthias Sun from Denmark's Information newspaper. Jared's going to read that.
Can you comment more broadly on the European fear of an EU-US subsidy race with IRA and Net Zero Act? American quantity technologically open versus European quality taxonomy.
Look, it's in no one's interest to have a race to the bottom. Or we need to reach a clean energy future. We cannot waste a single cent, and we don't have any funds to waste. And I think you have seen, as part of the Trade and Technology Act, where we have both sides have discussed the the desire to avoid subsidy races. So I think that is the same idea, but again, that those discussions are ongoing as we speak.
Okay, well, thank you. I think that's all of our questions. Thank you to everyone for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it. And thank you, Undersecretary, for taking the time out.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
That's the end of our roundtable with Undersecretary Fernandez. Thank you again for watching Views from Ukraine. Please join us next Wednesday at 5 p.m. for another panel in our normal format. Have a good night.